Joining us now is our science and tech correspondent, Ariel Levin-Waldman. So, Ariel, what do these economic figures tell us about China? How is the economy doing right now, and what is life like in China?
So that's a bit of a mixed bag, really, because the numbers are a bit all over the place. Certainly, China's numbers look a lot better than Western numbers. Their growth last year was 3.9%, which is far above any Western economy, largely off the back of bad policy in Western economies. But it's still a lot less than the Communist Party was expecting. The numbers they were posting was a 5.5% growth. So that's still substantially higher than the figures they actually got. Right. So mixed bag in the sense they're better off than most people are, but they're worse off than they expected to be. And that's not the end of the story. This is concurrent with a lot of other factors looking pretty grim for China's economic future. One of them is a demographic crisis. It's no secret that developing nations have a birth rate problem. China is no different. In fact, China is worse than most because they went for decades the one-child policy. Now they've got an aging population and nobody to work to support that population. You look across China and there are massive crises with the banks, not as bad as the ones in Lebanon, but people are trying to get money out of banks and they can't get money out of banks. There's just no money to go around. The Chinese Communist Party and the government is trying to restrict people taking money out of the economy simply because there is a possible crisis in the future. You add that to the fact that China's strength is it's always been its manufacturing. Well, you're at a part where China is modernizing. Their economy has become the second biggest in the world. They're a superpower, which means the standard of living is going up, which means the cost of manufacturing, at least on paper, should also be going up. And you're seeing more and more companies start looking outside of China, particularly for India, because they have just as big of a workforce. They're a lot less developed, and they could be a competitor, particularly given how much the West is considering divesting from China as it's the West's biggest rival.
Right, which brings me to my next question. There have been growing concerns that China is ultimately going to move to close itself off from the global economy. Are these valid concerns, especially given the fraying relationship that we're seeing between the United States and China when it comes to trade?
The big thing you have to ask is how you're defining global economy. Is China going to look to divorce itself from the Western economy? Is a very different question. China can't divorce itself from the global economy. They're a manufacturing superpower. It's the basis of their economy. They do most of their trade in dollars, so they can't diverge from the economy, at least not yet. However, China didn't get to where it is today by being stupid. And they just saw what happened to another Western rival who went against the status quo. Russia got economically isolated overnight. And China has to start making some plans for what happens if they start moving in ways the West does not like. So diverging from the Western economy and divesting from it is in their best interest when it comes down to building alternative models. And they have those in spades. You have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, you have the BRICS economy. This entire basis is non-Western economies building a parallel system that they can fall back on if they are ever cut off from Western trade and from Western economic institutions. So I wouldn't say that they are getting out of the global economy, not by a long shot, but are they laying the infrastructure so they are not dependent on the Western economy? Absolutely, and it would be stupid of them not to.
That, of course, brings us to Russia. You spoke about, obviously, what is happening right now with Russia. The West has expressed concern that cracking down too hard on Russia. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of sanctions, but going any farther, boots on the ground approach, arming Ukraine, could drive Putin into the arms of China. The question is China strong enough? Is it enough of a powerhouse for that to be a concern to the West?
Again, it's a more complicated answer. Are they strong enough? Absolutely. Their economy is worth roughly $18 trillion annually. That puts them just behind the United States. And the United States is virtually bankrolling most of the world's developed nations. So it's not a question of can they. The question is it in their best interest? Because China is so integrated with the Western economy at this exact point in time, they would not want to create any tension, and Russia's just not worth enough for them to create that tension over. Sure, Russia does export gas, they export oil, but is that enough for them to become China's sole supplier? Absolutely not. With that said, China is the one behind most of these non-Western trade organizations and multinational commitments like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS economies. Again, the groundwork's already there. Russia's already heading into that groundwork, and China's already seen the writing on the wall.
All right, well, Ariel, thank you for joining us and breaking that down. Really is fascinating, and we have a lot to wait and watch out for.